Welcome back to Change and Triumph with Tené Williams. Moi. Today's guest is Sherilyn Williams Casiano, MBA, CPA, a finance executive, entrepreneur, and family office strategist with more than 30 years of experience. From growing up in Antigua and St. Croix, which is where my grandma is from, as the seventh of 9 children, to working full time while earning her accounting degree, Sherilyn built a remarkable career that led her to KKR's internal family office practice and later to Columbia Business School. Today, as founder and CEO of Dynamic HQI, she helps ultra high net worth families, founders, and fund managers gain greater clarity, control, and confidence over their financial information. We'll discuss today her resilience, wealth technology, and how she is using artificial intelligence to improve decision making while keeping the human relationship at the center. Please welcome Sherilyn Williams Casiano.
Thank you so very much.
Awesome.
Great to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
You're welcome. You grew up in the Caribbean in Antigua and St. Croix. What was it like?
Ah, it was fantastic, actually. There's never a dull moment. Always had someone to play with or talk to. You had a tremendous amount of confidence. And I grew up a very happy child, having freedom that I didn't even know that freedom was a gift. So a very well adjusted, balanced upbringing. Summertime was fantastic, for all the different fruit seasons, the mangoes and the guinea and the tamarind and the sugar apple and the likes, and just having fun with my friends in our community. It really was an amazing childhood. I was in paradise and I lived a very happy childhood.
And that definitely matters when you grow up in a great childhood and in such a natural atmosphere. I could just imagine.
Yes,
So
yes.
you watched your mother build a business from selling candy all the way to
Oh,
catering. What did seeing that entrepreneurship up close plant in you?
it's very interesting. I always talk about my mom and just how resilient she was and how resourceful, and she had a brilliant business mind. And so for me as a teenager, first of all, I was in high school in the business track. So I was learning, being introduced to business, what it takes to run a business, acquiring skills for a white collar job. And then I had the pleasure of seeing my mom observing some activity within the community of other moms who were looking for ways to bring in additional revenue to their families. And what I admired most about my mom was she took the time to observe what was happening before she jumped into it. Because I remember
Mm,
having a conversation with her where we were talking and she identified various individuals in the communities and what they were doing. And then she was like, I can do that better.
of course. Nice.
And so one day, after she's kind of did her full observation and figured out what she's going to do and how she's going to do it, she just set up and at the bus stop and sold to kids. And it led from there to talking to the parents, the men and the women, the young adults that are kind of going off to work and figuring out what their gaps are, what their needs are around food and lunch and stuff like that. A lot of single men in the community, having to figure out what they're going to eat for lunch. And so again, using the power of observation, identifying a gap, a need, and then figuring out how she can meet that need and fill that gap. And that's basically what she did. And so she grew from selling candies to school kids to selling lunch to the men who worked at the alumina plant near us to full catering. And so I had the opportunity community to see how she went step by step and always with an observation and interaction with the market,
Mm.
understanding what their specific needs are, and then figuring out how she can do it in a cost effective way where she can earn a profit. And then she
That
became the go to person in the community.
Awesome, awesome. And, I'm just listening to your story about your mom, and, we hear so many stories about my dad and from men about their dad. And
Uh-huh.
to hear, your story from the woman watching the entrepreneurial woman and how it shaped you is really exciting. I'm curious, was your dad also by her side and they were kind of doing these businesses together? How was that dynamic?
So dad did he had his own job. And so he was the primary breadwinner in the family.
Mm.
And so his support was in not getting in her way
Got it.
and making sure that us children pull our weight. So, when she needed the little support in encouraging us to help, dad will be there to do that.
Awesome. And what did you carry out of that childhood that still shapes you and how you lead and build today?
The power of observing and identifying gaps and really planning before making that next step. So what she did was she observed the other women in the community and what they were doing and how they were finding ways to add to their family's income. And then identifying the gaps for them, what they were not doing,
Mhm.
or what they were doing incorrectly, and saying, "Okay, I can do this, and if I do it this way, I'll have greater results, and I will build loyalty." And that's what she did, and she did that consistently from each each growth that she experienced was again interacting with the community, observing, identifying, and then planning how she will do it. And then she also did something else. She tested it out with a few people.
Mm.
So,
Got it.
and then get feedback from them. So she started with one lunch meal and got feedback and from her customers, and they would say, "Miss Williams, do you have, oh man, I wish you'd had some pate
Mm.
or some fried chicken or some other curry chicken or
Don't
chicken
forget the
soup or something
oxtails,
like
peas, and
that."
rice.
Yes, 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 those things too. Rice pudding and all those. And so she would then test it out and see, well, okay, how many more other customers would like this? And so she would ask them, if I make this for you, would you buy it? And they would say yes, and they would come through, and then they'll tell their friends. And it was that constant sharing of information and information gathering that she did that I carry with me through to today.
That is amazing. So, when you were young, what did you think you were going to do? When you said, "When I grow up, I'm going to be
A
blank
teacher.
teacher." Wonderful.
Yes, I wanted to be a teacher, and then I also wanted to be an accountant. And
Okay.
so, it was both, and it was kind of up in the air which one I wanted to do. I was leaning towards teaching first. And then I think when I was about 14 years old, I got my first summer job. And, they had these summer job programs for high schoolers.
Yes.
And I got picked to work with the Department of Finance of the U.S. Virgin Islands in Christiansted. And that's when my explosion happened for me with the love of numbers. It was an amazing summer. I was able to bring the billing current, reconcile the books and records. The director offered me a job at the end of the summer program. Unfortunately, I was still in high school, so I obviously could not accept that job. But what a nice compliment it was, and how appreciative he was that for the I think 8 weeks that I worked with them, that I was able to help him get their billing current, and then they were, I don't know, several years behind, and it was quite a lot
My goodness.
of bills to go through and reconcile, and yes,
And
and
in
get the
8
books.
weeks, you were able to get them current after several years. Amazing.
Yes,
At
yes.
14.
Yes. That's because I
That's
love numbers, and so for me, once you learn the magic of numbers, it's fun and easy.
That's impressive. So then you decided to come to New York and transferred to Lehman College right there in the Bronx and earned
Yes.
your accounting degree. Awesome. And while working full time at Our Lady of Mercy Medical Center in the Bronx, which is my mother was born there at Our Lady of Mercy Medical Center. She actually talks about
Ah.
it. I think so, yeah, she was born right there. It sounds so familiar. So, what did
Oh,
surviving that season, where you're
mm.
working, going to school at night, what did that, teach you, and how did that make you feel?
So I think, first of all, it was, as you say, 9 to 5 at the hospital, 6 to 9 in the evenings at school, and then home in the evening, maybe some homework, maybe get some rest. Weekends was about homework and projects and sometimes a class on Saturday. So for me, I had a very full life. The pros of it is that I was able to live independently and focus on my education. The downside to that was didn't have much of a social life outside
Hey,
of my church community, but it was fine. It was I don't regret it. I loved it. It kept me focused and it helped get me where I am today.
that is a fact. I mean, I think that all young people should do that sacrifice for 5 years or so
Yep.
to live a much better next 40. So,
I
it
totally agree. I totally
yeah,
agree.
yeah, and, so tell us what happened right after that whole Our Lady of Mercy and Lehman College, where did you go from there?
Sure. So after I received my Bachelor of Science in accounting, I had a wonderful mentor at the hospital. She was a former banker. And so she retired and she used to volunteer at the hospital. And I was a secretary for the nursing department. And she volunteered within the nursing department as well. Her name was Marie. And so she kind of took me under her wings and mentored me around career and in finance and accounting and kind of guided me as to where to go. So once I completed my Bachelor of Science in accounting, I started looking for a job in Manhattan because first thing she said to me was, "You need to get out of the Bronx.
Yes.
You need to be working in Manhattan." And so I did. And then a real estate investment trust company, I think one of the largest one at the time, hired me to be the accountant for their Eastern region shopping malls. And
Okay.
so I spent several years there. And then and during that time, I studied for the CPA exam, passed the CPA exam, and then started thinking about what is my next leap.
Mhm.
And so I had the opportunity to move within the organization or look somewhere else. And
Right.
I actually had two offers. I chose to work for KKR.
Nice.
And of course, that was the best choice for me, right?
Of
It was a
course.
no-brainer.
Now, at the
And
time, though, they were just beginning.
so at the time, KKR had already established themselves because they started the firm
Oh.
in 1976.
Mhm.
Henry George and Jerry Kohlberg. And so they were at the time either number 1 or number 2. They were still, jockeying with another private equity firm, but they've certainly had already made a name for themselves. What they
Got it.
were, however, was still a small organization. They had the East Coast and the West Coast. George Roberts handled the West Coast and Henry Kravitz was responsible for the East Coast. And so it
Mhm.
was a very um family-friendly organization to be a part of. And that was my introduction to the ultra high net worth world, and that was very transformational for me. I learned
So
quite a lot. Go ahead.
tell me, what is it that, what year are we talking? So they started it in '76. You came in the '90s?
1994.
Okay, got it. So they were
Yeah.
already over a 15-year-old company. And
Yep.
for those of our listeners who don't have an idea what KKR private equity fund means, could you give us a little bit of overview of who that company
Sure.
is
So
and who they were
KKR's
to the industry?
Sure. Sure, absolutely, my pleasure. So KKR is for stands for Kohlberg, Kravis, Roberts and Company. Jerry Kohlberg, Henry Kravis, and George Roberts. Henry and George are cousins. These three gentlemen all came out of Bear Stearns, that's now defunct, and established a leveraged buyout firm where they invest in private companies through leverage buyout and then grow and turn the company around. Sometimes they carve out assets of the company and then turn around and sell it for a tremendous return. And so they were the leading firm in LBOs. And so
Amazing.
they are still well respected, revered, and to be hired by KKR is a feather in your cap, for sure.
Yes. Yes. So,
Sure.
and you mentioned it was a family office, which means what exactly?
So within the KKR firm, there was an internal family office, and I was part of that group where we provide family office services to the general partners of the firm and
Got it.
basically manage their personal wealth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. And so, in managing their personal wealth, that means diversifying their portfolios into multiple various industries. What industries in the 90s were popular?
So I think they concentrated in the alternative investment space. And so it was really more about finding other private equity funds and alternative investment funds to diversify their holdings. And of course, the classic stuff with all other wealthy individuals, they diversify as much as possible across real estate, directly held businesses and other sorts of investments, collectibles and the like.
Collectibles and the like. That's interesting because I went to a family office event recently and there were some fantastic, there's a new company that basically gets the license to reproduce several art pieces.
Mm,
Like, goodness, I'm trying to think of artists right now that are famous and it's blanking me. But anyway, he'll take like a
a
famous
Monet.
yeah, a Monet or, any famous painting. I've got a
Mhm.
P in my head, but I like something Picasso.
Picasso.
Picasso or Monet or, any famous painting and redo it into a bust of pure silver. And yeah, so that's an interesting collectible that has value in two ways because the estate has given them the permission and the license to recreate. And then they also do busts and different things like that. So very familiar with collectibles in the space. And I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't realize, how important art and just other types of collectibles are to a portfolio as well, in
Absolutely.
maintaining value. So you mentioned Bear Stearns, and I think that was during the crash of the savings and loan scandal in the 90s, right? Now, were you in around when that happened?
So I think, well, Bear Stearns went out of business in 2008 when we had
Oh, okay, that was the next scandal.
yeah,
Okay, I was
yes,
thinking
yeah, yeah,
okay, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
When the market crashed, and yes, and the real estate market crashed, and the whole world
Yes,
crashed. It seemed. So yes, they were one of the I don't know what do you call it, one of the victims of that, if you will.
right. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. So, okay, so let's talk about the dynamics inside this wonderful family office. You're working in here, you're doing well, and it's like you became part of the family. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I spent several years at KKR, and then during my time there, the firm sponsored me for the executive MBA program at Columbia University. During that experience, I did a project on family office operations, and
Mm,
that kind of sparked my entrepreneurial gene
mm,
that I
got it.
inherited from my mom.
Of course.
And I started thinking of life beyond KKR, or what I would like to
Yes.
do. I had a conversation with Henry after I completed my MBA, to go in and talk about my experience. And he's also a Columbia Business School grad alumni as well.
Mm,
And so we were just, talking about our experiences and then what I wanted to do going forward. And I said, well, I did this project on family office operations, and I'd love to be able to go out and establish a multifamily office and kind of take what I've learned here and to be able to offer it to other ultra high net worth families that are not part of the KKR family.
I
And
see.
so with his blessings, I left the firm and with business from the firm. And then as a couple of the senior GPs retired, they joined my family office and there we took off.
Wow, that is
Yes.
phenomenal. So, and I'm surprised that you were able to get through that transition culturally and he blessed the move, especially with you being the obvious that we are Black females,
Yes.
right? What was that like in the 90s and early 2000s on Wall Street? I mean, did you feel any different in those rooms?
Yeah, so with the executives, absolutely not. I was a part of their team, respected as part of their team. Within my group, no. But, at the lunch table, someone will say something off color. So
Off color.
in the lunchroom.
Okay.
But, you just handle it appropriately and you move on.
Right. Got it.
Right.
Got it. So, but how did that make you feel? You had the ability to think ahead to say, I'm going to start my own multifamily office because I'm good at this. I don't think you felt that there was anything holding you back from doing that.
No, if there's anything that's gonna hold me back, it's my own fears of stepping out and doing something completely different and leaving the safety net of a 9 to 5 job with a guaranteed salary, et cetera, and then, stepping out on your own and trying to, and having to create your own source of revenue.
And that's not easy by any
No,
stretch, by any stretch.
no,
Now,
no. So
did you have a family at this point when you decided to do all that and step out on
So
your
I
own and
I
leave
left
that?
with business from KKR. So it was just, becoming I guess a contractor, if you will, to help me establish my practice. And it just so happened that one partner decided to leave the firm and he was referred to me and he became part of my family office. And then another one several years later retired and again became part of my family office. And then, through the years, I worked with other families and other projects and just kind of build on top of that.
Wow. So let me get this straight. What I've heard so far is you went from an accountant at a REIT to CFO at KKR and the Toker family, which we haven't talked about yet, or I think you mentioned it just now. And now you're commercializing all of that through DHQI. That is
Yes.
your current baby. So, what's the lesson about all of these lived experiences into a business?
So going back to what I said about my mom and observing, and identifying gaps and collecting information. That's the platform came out of that, the financial intelligence family office platform that we're commercializing and expanding into new markets, such as to fund managers and to investors and then to growth stage founders who are either have their first fundraise or are going out to do a successive fundraise where they need to have the support of a CFO when they're making decisions that are six figures and above. They need more than a gut feel. They need concrete data to support those decisions. And
That
that's
makes sense.
those are the markets that we're expanding into. And the technology allows us to do that efficiently, but also at the same time give more to those stakeholders, to the fund managers, to the investors, to the growth stage founders, and to the family offices. So we're still very much entrenched in the family office space, but we understand the relationships. Family offices are also investors in alternative investments, in venture capital funds, private equity funds, hedge funds. They're also investors in directly held businesses, and some of those directly held businesses need CFO support. And as the CFO for those family offices, we're also representing the family's interest in providing services to those privately held businesses, as well as the funds.
Wow. So we talked about what your one truth is, and you said
Yeah.
that it was start despite that fear. So
hmm
start despite the fear, treat failure as a teacher, build resilience. And when did you actually learn that, not just believe it? I mean, you've gone through, we mentioned the 2008 crisis, or they call it the Great Financial Crisis.
Yep.
And before that, there were several other crises. We've gone through the healthcare crises. How
hmm
have you yourself and the families you represent, how have you helped people get through that? How did you bite down on that fear and go anyway?
So, in 2008, my families were ahead of the game in all
Mm,
this. And the reason why they were ahead of the game is not that they weren't affected, but they certainly weren't as deeply affected as other families were. And that is
got it.
because we had been giving them financial intelligence along the way that they leveraged to make decisions early on, selling real estate before it busts
Right.
or just at the start of it, not waiting until it gets so bad that, you were selling your real estate for pennies on the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, moving brokerage accounts before the Bear Stearns and the Lehman Brothers collapse. And
Right.
so, having access to high quality financial information is key to staying ahead of the game, being informed, making intelligent and evidence based decisions continually. So
Mhm.
even if there is a crisis and even if you are affected, the effect is not as intense or as deep as it would be if you didn't have information ahead of time and you weren't leveraging that information to make decisions. Whether it's rebalancing your balance sheet, putting more money into a specific investment, switching to changing an investment from a loan to an equity, the timing of all of these things is really important. And knowing when to make those types of a change really depend on accessing high quality information in a timely manner. So not stale information that's, 12 months old, but real time information that they can use.
Wow, wow. And how does one deal with something that is completely unexpected? I agree with you that there could have been data. If you had the high level data that you're talking
Yeah.
about, you definitely saw it because we saw multiple shifts from 2002 through 2007. I mean,
Yep.
it's not real. I saw in Las Vegas at the time, 2005, where the loans, I was a mortgage banker at the time. I was a
hmm
mortgage broker, and then I decided to be an account executive for several of the mortgage banks, one being a company called First Franklin Financial, which was bought by
Sure.
Merrill Lynch.
hmm
And so, and a few small others, subprime mortgage banks. So I left Las Vegas because I had to shut down my mortgage brokerage because it was just so insanely crazy in the mortgage
hmm
business. And when I say crazy, the loans were nonstop. And then they kind of got so saturated. It became so saturated that we couldn't hold on to our loan officers because we would have had to pay them instead of 50% for a new person, we would have had to pay them actually 100% commission. And it was so insanely saturated and so much business. So that's a clue. And all of the Toll Brothers and KB Homes and all of these builders were building nonstop and giving away loans at 95% no income, no asset loans.
hmm
So actually, all of that change threw me out of the market because I couldn't compete
Mhm.
With in my mortgage brokerage, I couldn't compete with people only getting paid with the office only getting paid $4.95 for a processing fee instead of making a percentage of the of each of the loans. So there were several signals that happened up until the great financial crisis that if you had that data, you could have definitely made some moves. Even the bond markets, just there were several things that you look back and you go, "Oh, yeah."
Exactly.
But if you're looking for it, then
Yeah.
you know to look for it. But then you've got a change like the health crisis of 2020. How can
Yeah.
you prepare for something like that? Would you say that it's diversity in the portfolio that helps people prepare in general? Because I'm a big Ray Dalio fan, and that's what I always say.
Yeah. Yeah. So diversity definitely is important. And the other is cash flow management.
Mhm.
So for a lot of people, the cash flow slowed down tremendously, and it was, "Oh, okay. What do we do? Do we have a large enough cash reserve to weather this?" There's also people management that you have to consider. Now, eventually, everyone figured it out and they caught up, but there was at least a moment where everyone's like, "Well, what do we do? No one could come into work. How do we continue our working and stuff like that?" But I think ultimately the big thing is it's the cash flow,
Mhm.
and not having that cash reserves. If I were to give anybody any advice, I would say the one thing is to manage your cash reserve
Mm.
religiously. That's one of those things that you, as a business owner, you want to always have a strong cash reserve to weather these economic downturns and global crises as they
Mhm.
happen.
Mhm, mhm. So being diversified in the portfolio and having cash flow, buying more cash flow instead of assets that kind of may take a longer turn. Do you think that is something that's common among wealthier families?
It depends on who's managing the family's wealth, right?
Mhm.
So, let me take a step back. So there is that, but one of the most transformational um, inf- uh, experience that I had at working for the ultra high net worth was that there are two types of people in this world. There are spenders and there are savers.
Uh,
And spenders will always spend first and save later, and it doesn't matter how wealthy they are.
mm,
And savers will save first and spend later, no matter how wealthy or poor they are. And
interesting.
so if an ultra high net worth individual is a spender, they will often have cash flow liquidity challenges, right? And that has to be managed.
Mm,
And so that was one of the things that I learned very, very early on in my time at KKR. Because
mm.
each person's got their own personality and they all fall into one of these. They're either a spender or a saver. So the
That's
savers will never have
interesting.
a cash flow issue in any crisis because they will always be prepared. A spender would. So if you have a spender for a client, you have to be really tight with the managing the cash flow for them.
Interesting. So I think you just kind of crushed some, well, wealthier families do this or wealthier families do that. You're just saying, hey, there's spenders and there's savers, and no
It's
matter
true.
how wealthy you are, that's what it is across the board. That is so interesting. And so,
Yes. I mean,
yeah,
so I'll just say one quick story. It's like I just remember a situation where there was over a weekend, like $100 million was spent in over a weekend, and you're like, "What? This doesn't
my
happen."
goodness, 100 million. Was that the
It,
movie
it,
Brewster's Millions where they had to?
and so I just remember thinking, "Oh, how do you spend $100 million in a weekend?" But it happened.
It
So
happened.
and
My
that's a
goodness.
spender for you, right? So
Right,
the funds came
right.
in and it went right out. Now, it wasn't on frivolous things. It was basically, assets, the idea that the cash shouldn't stay in the account for any
Right.
extended period of time.
My goodness, my goodness. So you're building the DWIMS platform, which took years of refinement through real setbacks that we just talked about. What did
Yep.
that long road teach you that a faster win never would? Tell me about that DWIMS system.
So, Dynamic Wealth Information Management Business Solution was built as a family office platform to support the ultra high net worth families who have very diverse assets across all assets class, from very liquid cash all the way to the collectibles and fine art and decorative art and direct investments, alternative investments, etc. And residences and then different and diverse ownership structures and trusts and family partnerships and private foundations, and managing all of that information in a single platform was the result of my years of observation and collecting information from working with ultra high net worth families. And so the long road has taught me that when you build something that the foundation is solid, it can weather, at least hold out for a longer period of time than a something that's built on a shifty foundation.
Mm,
The technology's backbone and is the general ledger, that is double entry, but it's seeded with, and this is really what makes it unique. It's seeded with the blocks that it needs to be able to withstand changes. And so new technology come on and they claim to do this, they claim to do that. We compare them to our technology, and we have historically been comparatively better and do more, and it's more in line with what family offices need. And it was built with the intention of being able to service very diverse asset classes, ownership structures, and operating activities. And so it makes it um, easier for us to diverse into those other markets that I mentioned earlier. Partnership accounting, that's, addressing the needs of fund managers in managing all of their investors and the allocation of income and expenses, and the ownership structure, the trusts, managing trust assets and keeping it separate from the grantor's assets, and how do you carve that out? That's all built into the foundation of the technology, so that you can pick it up and put it into this industry and it will meet the needs of that industry appropriately. For me, what I've learned, to come back to your answer, is I say all that to say this, is that you either deepen your confidence in what you've built, you recognize the need that there is, you need to change it as the circumstance and situation and demand for it changes, but the foundation has to be solid. So for me, it's continuing to believe in it. At times is challenging because just things aren't going the way that I want it to go. Disappointment around work that was done, opportunities that were missed, and just having to process all of that and then still believe in the technology.
mm. It seems like you've taken technology over the years and definitely used it to your advantage. And you're currently using AI daily for research, drafting,
Yes.
meeting prep, and you're integrating Agent Land
Yep.
AI into DHQI technologies. What has
Yes.
AI given you back? Has it been time, clarity, capacity?
I think all three. I think what AI and how I benefit from AI and why we are integrating AI into the commercialized version of our technology is that AI frees up my time to think more deeply and therefore feed it with my deeper thinking and then get more out of that. So I'm keep peeling back the layers until you get to the heart of it. And so when you get to the heart of it, you find the pearl, if you will, or the gold or whatever that precious stone is that you identify with. And that's what I like about AI. It allows me to dig deeper in a shorter amount of time.
That makes sense. And what do you feel about people that are in your space? Multifamily offices, family offices, people that are in the finance space. Is do you think they need to get onto AI, or do you think that it needs to stay extremely human? Is it a choice at this point at all?
So I think it's a choice because there'll always be folks who will not gravitate towards AI. I think if you are a business owner, if you are an executive leader, you need to figure out how to leverage AI in your organization for the operations, for the growth of the business, for the sustainability of the business as well. AI is not going to go away, right? So either you learn how to use it or you don't.
Mhm, mhm. So for someone working full-time while
Hmm.
chasing a degree or a dream like you did, exactly where you once were, what's the one thing that keeps them going? What would you say to them?
I think your goal. I mean, for me, it was I wanted to get my accounting degree. So that kept me going. Being a widow and a single mom with two young boys, uh, I could have shut down my business and go get a full-time job and be done with it, but I had a goal.
Mm,
So I made a decision that I was going to keep my business, but I will just simply put a pause on my larger goals until my
mhm.
children are adults. And so now they're young adults, and now I am
Nice.
100% focused on my early goals for growing and scaling the business and diversifying the revenue streams, which is really what I'm working on right now.
Nice, nice. We didn't talk about your family. I wanted to ask you early on about your family, and so I'm glad we got that in there. And so there was a pause. There was a pause there, and you kind
Yep.
of picked back up, picked your bridges up, and you started again.
Yeah.
I understand that completely. And what should a founder do before they try to commercialize years of hard won expertise like you have?
So you have to know, what are you offering? So what is the service or product you're offering? What problem is it solving? I have talked to founders who have great ideas. At least they think it's a great idea. And their excitement is, tangible. But as a I often ask them the question, so who's going to buy your product or service? So you have to know your market. You have to do the work to learn your market because you find value in your product or service doesn't necessarily mean that there is a big enough market that will see value in your product or service to warrant starting a business.
Hmm.
And also, who else is addressing this need or want or gap? And is there a substitute that people are happy with and will be reluctant to give up to utilize your product or service? So research. And I mean, with AI, it will cut down the amount of time it takes for you to do that research, but talking to people still also helps. But yes, gather the information that you need, figure out how you're going to make money before you start a business. Because if you don't know how you're going to make money and how you're going to generate a profit, not just make money, then you'll be working for working's sake and you'll never be profitable.
Of course, of course. And what about founders that are looking to exit? What would you say to that company based on your experience? because
plan.
you're right in the middle of all of that.
Yep, you plan. You plan your exit 5 years in advance.
Hmm.
You start working towards what you envision what your exit should look like. What's going to make you feel like I've done it. I'm now ready to walk away from it. And how do I want to walk away from it? Do I want to retire um and mentor someone within the organization to take over? Do you want to exit by selling the business and walk away? And these are the kinds of things that any business owner is thinking about an exit should be planning, I would say 5 years in advance.
5 years.
Yeah. It takes
That's
time.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
there's an emotional, there's a psychological, and then there is just the physical component to an exit that sometimes I think founders don't really take into account. They only think about, I just want to exit. How much money can I get, from this exit? But it's, it messes with your mind a little bit. And what are you going
Mm,
to do after you exit? If you don't have something lined up to do, then you're bored and then you find yourself wanting to go back into it again.
of
And you
course.
start another business and you start the whole cycle all over again.
Of course. So, but most family offices are businesses that exited. We do a lot and talk to a lot of family offices that are exited businesses, exited founders that now have this capital that they need to manage, right?
Yes.
And they need to put it somewhere. And that's really where a lot of people forget that's where the money came from in the first place is they built a great business.
Yep.
It doesn't always have to be just generational because there's so many new, wealthier families that need that direction to figure out, okay, what asset classes to put that money in. But most of
Hmm.
all, like you said, 5 years before figuring out how they're going to get out unscathed with the least amount of taxes, with the right trust set up, with all of this
Yep.
proper planning. So that's
Yes.
basically what you do. So do you have a offer that you may want to offer to our listeners?
Sure. I would invite your listeners to visit our website, dynamichqi.com, to learn more about our services and to contact us. And we'd be happy to have a free consultation with anyone who is interested in learning more about our products and services.
Wonderful, wonderful. So this is Change and Triumph and closing out, looking back at everything you've survived, everything you've learned, and everything you're building now. What has been your greatest change and what has been your greatest triumph?
My greatest triumph is becoming a mom. I enjoy being a mom.
Wonderful.
Um, my greatest change, I would say becoming a founder
Mm.
and all of the changes and triumphs that comes with being a founder, the lessons learned, the victories won, the times of reflection, the times of looking forward, the relationships that you build, the opportunities that you have, and the brilliance that you encounter in conversations with other people.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn, for your time. Thank you for
You're
joining us
welcome.
on Change and Triumph. You have been phenomenal. This was a great convo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure chatting with you. Take care.
Awesome.